Over the course of the London 2012 Games, Nicola Adams OBE became an icon after winning Great Britain's first ever female boxing gold. Get ready to get inspired by double Olympic gold medalist, WBO world champion, and Great Britain's most successful female boxer of all time, Nicola Adams, who joins us today. Nicola, great to have you today, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you're inspired from hearing from Naomi, and we'll certainly be delving into that a little bit later on. But I wanted to first ask you, quite simply, we're obviously talking about Black History Month and diversity inclusion, but a simple question to start with is, why is it important that we celebrate and talk about Black history, especially dedicate a month to it?
So you don't learn about it in schools. I never learned about it in school. I always had to research anything that I wanted to know. So I think it's really important to have Black History Month, just so that not just our culture, but other cultures as well can learn about the history of Black people.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Nicola, because I find myself, both my parents born in Nigeria, I was born here in England, Islington, and I've embarrassed myself a few times just not fully understanding it. And some of that's just my own personal responsibility. But when it's not part of the educational syllabus, when it's not widely taught, you do find yourselves actually wanting to understand more. And most recently, the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, when we were talking about taking the knee and that kind of thing, I heard him on a radio interview. And this is the Foreign Secretary who went on and said, I'm not quite sure where the taking the knee came from. Perhaps it came from the Game of Thrones. And I thought, if our Foreign Secretary in our country doesn't even understand our history, I think there's probably a lot of people that don't understand our history. To quote Naomi, a lot of untruths. And that's why it's perhaps important to discuss this if we want to live in this multicultural society. I guess to counter that, because not everyone perhaps wants to celebrate it or wants to have that conversation. So what do you say to people that say, why should we have a month dedicated to Black history? Because we don't have a White History Month.
I mean, for the plain simple fact that you're taught about white history all the way through school. So you pretty much know everything that's going on. But with Black history, you're not taught anything at all apart from a little bit on slavery, and that's it. And that's where it ends. You don't learn about Black scientists, people that Black people that invented things. You don't hear about any of that stuff. So I'd say it's not so much maybe that you don't have to celebrate it, but I feel like it's definitely an area where you should still educate yourself on it.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think to a certain extent almost the admission that we need a month to celebrate and dedicate Black history isn't really ideal for me. But if our Black culture and history, and like you said, celebrating people who have actually given so much to this country, if that was incorporated as part of your educational pathway, then perhaps there wouldn't be a need for it. But until it is, then you need to have this standalone event to be able to talk about it. But for you growing up, you know, we've heard the phrase many a time, especially over the last 18 months, you've got to see it to believe it. What inspired you? Who did you look to as inspiration when you were growing up on your path to success?
Well, my hero was Muhammad Ali. I mean, he was the greatest boxer of all time. He did a lot of things for human rights. I just loved everything about him, from winning his Olympic medal, going pro, for everything that he stood for outside of the ring as well. So that's why he was a big inspiration for me.
And for you, going from someone who's inspired by Muhammad Ali, picking up your boxing gloves, getting absolutely incredible at what you did, landing in 2012, having that iconic moment, and you've had many moments. How do you then adjust when you've looked for inspiration, but now so many people are looking to you for that same inspiration?
I'm just always thinking about moving forward, creating new goals, looking for more areas of change, not just in the Black community, but in the LGBTQ community, for females as well. There's still a huge struggle for female equality. There's a lot of work to be done, and it's like for me, I feel like it should have already been done already. These things shouldn't even be an issue anymore. Like, I just don't want the next generation having to still celebrate Black History Month, having to still fight for equality. Like, these are things that should have been taken care of years ago, generations ago. And it's so sad to see that we're still trying to change that now.
Of course, and you know, you've been outspoken, and it's absolutely fantastic to hear your thoughts. You know, a fighter in the ring and outside of it. But you've already mentioned the inequality that females have, that Black people have, as well as the LGBTQ community have. You represent all those things. Do you find it a real pressure, or is it a privilege for you to really step out and try and change the narrative and try and change that base of inequality that you may have had to endure?
For me, it's been a chance to really step out and say, hey, you know, even though I am all those things, I've been able to achieve some really great, inspiring things as well. And I guess it's just, for me, it's just all about the next generation to be able to see me and say, hey, do you know what? She's absolutely done the most, and she's had all those other things against her, and I've just never let that hold me back. I guess I've always been the type of person that always wants to learn and improve and progress. I believe that you're never the finished article. There's always something new you can learn. There's always an area of skill that you can develop. And for me, it's the same thing with educating myself on other cultures as well. I'm finding out about other religions, other people, and just being able to know a lot more. I just think it's just really, really important that not just me, but I believe everybody should do that. And I think it's the only way that we're ever going to be able to get along, is if we actually educate ourselves on all the cultures.
I think that's a really good point, which we've briefly touched upon. But Black History Month is almost labelled, this is us, this is our culture, this is our history, go out and learn it. And it's almost, it feels like it appeals to everyone apart from Black people. But you're also saying that during that month of Black history, where it's a moment for you to reflect as well as learn more about yourself, ancestors, and each and every other person that might look similar to you, had a similar background. Would that be right?
I mean, it's the one time in the month that I'm always seeing something new that I didn't know before, which always surprises me. I think I've learned a lot, and then there's something else I'll be like, oh wow, you know, there's something else that I didn't know that I've learned today. And I think that's the good thing about Black History Month. It's a time where you get to learn things that you might not necessarily have known before, especially because it's not taught as a curriculum at school. I think moving forward, really, this is something that should be taught in school, so that the next generation have a better understanding of Black culture, and it's not just for the 1 month of the year.
I remember speaking to Jason Robinson, who famously scored the only try for England in 2003 when they went on to win the World Cup. He was made England captain for the first time. I've forgotten the exact date of it, but during last Black History Month, he then realised he was actually the first Black England captain in a professional era. And that was something he was finding out almost 20 years on. And that was a real moment of reflection for him. He wished he'd known at the time, not just what it represented, playing for your country's incredible, captain your country's incredible, but that deeper understanding of the achievement he made. And it was a shame that he wasn't able to fully immerse himself in that moment during the moment, but took almost 2 decades to find out. So it is a real month of discovery, which you've already just pointed out. And lastly, before we get into the panel discussion, there's still so much to talk about. The last 18 months is, you know, this conversation, diversity, inclusion, equality, discrimination has been at the forefront of everyone's mind. But how do you start a conversation with someone who's looking to perhaps understand a little bit more about your experiences and wanting to do something about it?
The big key really is the listening. making sure you're taking on board what people are saying to you, and not just thinking about it from your point of view. You need to think about it from the other perspective, and how racism has been affecting Black people. So when you haven't experienced racism before, maybe it'll be a lot harder to understand from your point of view. So I think the big key really is just being able to listen and ask the person what they want and what they need, and how you can help them.
It's such a good point, purely because you're trying to make something relatable, which is perhaps unrelatable to almost 95% of the population, and wanting them to invest some time into understanding as to how and why you feel or think the way that you do, which is really, really key. Thank you so much for joining us. Nicola Adams there.